Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
It's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 702 for the 20th of March, 2022. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia, where if I hear carefully out the window, the birds are chirping. They're probably happy the rain's gone away again. Came back yesterday. Looks like a sunny day today. A good day for washing. Coming up at the top of the show, I speak to Arjun Nidhigalu, who came to my attention just recently as he's produced a series on YouTube called Vulture Watch. No, he does not watch vultures. Well, maybe he does in a way of speaking. He looks at pseudoscience, specifically things like crazy devices that are supposed to tune your aura or something like that, and homeopathy, anti-vaxxers. I looked at some of the videos over at Vulture Watch and I learned quite a bit about a device called the Healy, which I don't think really does any healing at all. Well, maybe it does. Do you want your aura tuned up? Is your aura out of tune? What tune does your aura play? Did you know that bacteria sing songs? Find out more coming up at the top of the show. Then we catch up with Susan Gerbeck from Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia. She tells us, well, we sort of eavesdrop. She tells us about another milestone for the group and their efforts to combat pseudoscience and bad information on Wikipedia. After that, I read a letter. An email sent to my friend and colleague Brian Dunning at the Skeptoid podcast. And this letter is from a listener of his in Russia. Of course, much in the news at the moment. And it's a very heartfelt and interesting letter coming to Brian from Russia. I think you will find this quite something. A sort of an insight into what's going on there at the moment. Then to round off the show, we go back into the Trove archives, and amongst other things, we find a review of a TV show I used to watch years ago called The Extraordinary. Oh yes, it was sort of an attempt to have a paranormal, supernatural, mystery type show here in Australia with lots of reenactments of so-called paranormal, supernatural events. Maybe some Australian listeners will remember it. It ran in the mid-1990s, and I discovered the program is on YouTube. I'll link to that in the show notes. But before we start with the first segment, I'll just remind you that I will be speaking live tomorrow night here in Australia, Monday the 21st, for my dear friends at the Victorian Skeptics, the Vic Skeptics. Oh, how I wish I could visit you all and have a lovely dinner down at Lygon Street. Anyway, I'll be appearing for them, and you can join in. I'll be talking about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project, which I notice has been getting a lot of international press lately. I'm very pleased about that. It's been published in The Skeptic in the UK. Rob Palmer has had it published in The Skeptical Inquirer in South America too. It's got some notice, so that's all very good. Anyway, join me tomorrow night here in Australia. Again, the link is in this week's show notes. If you scroll down to the end of the list of today's episode, you'll see that link. And I don't know about your part of the world, but the numbers of COVID here in Australia seem to be on the uptick. And this is because I think of the new sub-variant of Omicron. So no matter where you are, please take care. And if you happen to have COVID at the moment and you're a little bit miserable, then we are certainly thinking about you. Stay tuned at the end of the episode for more announcements from me. But now it's time for me to run downstairs looking for cats along the way who like to sort of hide on the stairwell as you run down. You've got to be very careful. Maybe I'll tiptoe down the stairs. Cook some bread to make toast. And what will I have on it? Avocado. With a bit of pepper. Okay. While I'm doing that, I hope you enjoy The Skeptic Zone. And joining me now on the line, all the way from beautiful Sydney, Australia, how about that? It's somebody who I've only just discovered recently, fascinating bloke, an interesting backlog of work already online, which we'll get to in a minute. It's Arjun Nidhigalu. Hello, Arjun.
Hey, Richard. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Good to see you. Not a problem, good to see you. Obviously, these days we like everybody else, we're relying on video conferencing and all that sort of stuff. We can actually see each other face to face, which is a really good thing. Now, you've been brought to my attention by I imagine our mutual friend, Loretta Marin from Friends of Science and Medicine, who has been a guest on the podcast many times before. And she said, look, check out this guy's videos. I thought, oh yeah, okay, I'll have a look. Good recommendation. And wow, what an interesting series you've got up so far. You call your YouTube channel Vulture Watch, which is quite interesting. But before we get into that, what's your background and what's your interest in, dare I say, skepticism?
Yeah, I think skepticism's been a bit of a savior for me. Back when I was quite a religious person, I was quite pseudoscientific myself not too long ago. And so, yeah, I feel like there's a bit of making up for me to do from that perspective. So about myself, look, I arrived in Australia as an immigrant when I was 11 years old with my family. Barely could speak a word of English, but had to learn from scratch. And so I was interested in mathematics and science growing up. I eventually studied engineering and now work as a product manager at an automotive company. So I did spend a good 10 years tutoring high school mathematics and physics, which taught me how to communicate ideas effectively. But like I said, through most of that time, I was quite religiously inclined. I was a practicing Hindu, a polytheist, made many pilgrimages to India, convinced I was destined to become a monk of some sort.
Oh, wow.
So I practiced meditation, learned Sanskrit, read all the major books, the holy books, but the more I read, the less convinced I was. And luckily I didn't get suckered into like a sunk cost fallacy, and literally over a period of 6 to 12 months, I basically renounced all of that and became more of a rationalist, if you will.
Wow.
So yeah, skepticism was my savior in that sense.
That's interesting, and of course this is a story that is not unknown.
Yes.
Some people follow a very similar path to you, being brought up in one religion or another, or one set of beliefs or another, and discover skepticism. It's oddly like, in my situation, being brought up believing in UFOs and monsters, because when I was a little kid, that's what I really thought they were real.
Yes.
But as I was getting older, coming to the realization that, oh, hang on a second, that's not the full story. Anyway, so you've had this interest, and it's obviously had a big effect on you, but you've done something about it. You've actually, I would like to say, in a sense, put pen to paper. What I mean is you've got in front of the camera and you've started this Vulture Watch. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Vulture Watch is basically my personal venting chamber, I suppose, for all the pseudoscience that goes on. And I wanted to make it a systematic way in which I, debunk claims that are made without any evidence. So the way it started was actually quite a funny story. So a mate of mine took me out to dinner with another friend who I wasn't so aware of, but she happened to be someone who studied psychology, and she made a claim at that dinner to say that prayer was more effective than therapy for depression, which I thought was a pretty bold claim, especially from someone who studied psychology. And so she was kind of mouthing off studies that proved it, et cetera, and the more I argued against her, the more I realized how difficult it was to kind of, provide evidence against it. She was kind of using her position as someone who's had the education, and my friend was more or less convinced at the end of that dinner that, prayer is, very useful. I went home really frustrated, thinking, how could I have argued that better? How could I have asked more pointed questions? And so that's how it started. And months later, I came across a video by Jaggi Vasudev, who's like a cult leader, for lack of a better term, and Deepak Chopra, another cult leader, one might say. So they claimed that, vaccines were ineffective, and that, eliminating the COVID-19 virus may not be the best idea or the best solution for humanity. So that really ticked me off, and so that was my first video where I just jotted down everything they said, and I had counter arguments with evidence and references and things like that. And once that video came out, the next few kind of propped up as things that I was triggered by various people or social media posts, and we're only 4 videos in now, but it's only been a few months as well. So, yeah.
And I noticed your videos get a lot of comment, which is really good. Let's get back to something you just said. You mentioned the name Deepak, and I was looking at one of your videos the other day, and I had to have a laugh because you talk about the Deepak Chopra Zone.
Yes.
What do you mean by the Deepak Chopra Zone? Not the Skeptic Zone, folks, but the Deepak Chopra Zone.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it's a very big zone. I feel it's the significant population falls under it. Basically, anyone who understands sciencey words at a bare minimum level, so they can kind of recognize approximately what it means, but don't really know what they mean. Things like quantum or frequencies or so that's kind of the Deepak Zone. They've had kind of high school education or even primary school education. They can recognize the words and they feel like they're sciencey and credible in some way, but they don't really know what it entails. So that's what I call the Deepak Zone, and it's a huge market. It's where a lot of these pseudoscientific things are sold. And
I like it. I'm glad somebody's put a name to that, because skeptics have been aware of this concept for a very long time. The sort of people who will listen to something, the expression word salad.
yes.
Just putting frequencies, vibration, quantum, all together. And we've seen this for a long time. So the Deepak Zone, I do like that. But let's talk about one of the videos that I found very interesting. Now, you've done a video on the Healy product.
Yes.
And which is, I've seen some of the original videos of the people spruiking this device, and I saw your video. For people who have never heard of Healy, what is it exactly?
So Healy is an app, and it's also a device. So it was developed by a gentleman called Markus Schmecker in Germany. So he postulates that we all have a bioenergetic field around us. Some of us call it an aura, and apparently we're all part of a quantum information field that kind of permeates the whole universe. So he's figured out a way of hacking this field, which means that you can put in your photo, for example, Richard, into this app, and it'll measure your aura through no connection to your body. And it'll figure out what's going on with your body. It'll figure out if your chakras are aligned, if you have energetic blocks, and then it'll pump out some frequencies in the form of microcurrents through your body to realign you and harmonize you into your field.
Wow.
Yeah, so
all this from an app.
Yeah,
on your phone,
an app
and
a little device that pumps out microcurrents. Yes. So they've been the thing about this Healy device, though, is they've been supremely clever in finding the loopholes in the regulations to make sure that they can sell the product effectively. And so with this video, I just wanted to bring a bit more awareness. And I was honestly shocked at how little criticism this thing had. I mean, it's an FDA cleared product. It's something that is on the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods. So I'm surprised more people don't have an issue with it, especially given that it costs upwards of $2,000 all the way up to about $6,000 to get one of these things.
Oh, it's an old story. I mean, over the years, I've been doing this over 20 years.
Yeah.
I've come across so many products where you look at it and you scratch your head and say, well, how on earth can this be have any form of government sanction whatsoever? But we see it again and again, which is really sad.
Yeah, it is.
One of the things that really made me laugh again watching your video was, and maybe you can explain this, because it really needs explaining. What are the songs of bacteria?
So Taryn Lee, who claims to have brought Healy to Australia, she's one of the pioneers who brought it to Australia. So she put out a video explaining to normal folk, you know how we say, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. I suppose that's what she's done. And she's explaining how bacterial infections in your body have a certain frequency because, you know, everything is frequency, everything is energy. So she's saying that this bacteria is singing a song that the Healy is able to pick up through the information field that we talked about before, and it's able to send a song back to get rid of that bacteria, is exactly what she says. So songs of bacteria became a bit of a funny tag for me to try and capitalize on for the video. So yeah, that's where that comes from.
But it does almost sound like an album by some pop group, doesn't it?
That's right.
Songs of bacteria.
Yeah.
Music to listen to while you're in hospital. Maybe you're of the same mind as me. And I did spend time to look at some of the videos of the people, you know, selling this device. Mm-hmm. And then they're in their backyard or in their house and they're holding it up to the camera. Do you think these people are permanently living in the Deepak zone? In other words, it appears to me that a lot of these people are convinced this is real science or real technology.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is driven by conspiracies around the medical mafia, or, you know, the video's only been up a few days now, but you can already see in the comments the kind of things people are saying. You know, I've been accused of being part of the, you know, conventional medical mafia.
Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's where a lot of it comes from, and because they're desperately looking for alternative ways of, you know, looking at things, that they get suckered into these kind of things, and yeah, they, like you said, that a lot of these people are permanently stuck in that Deepak zone, and part of my efforts with Vulture Watch is to try and give them the awareness, give them a chance to kind of get out of there like I did many years ago.
Now, another video in your series so far deals with a subject that I've been looking at for decades now. I've had many adventures with this subject, which is homeopathy, of course, but you take a very strong stand in your video, and you look specifically at the influence homeopathy has in India, especially with the Indian government.
Yeah, I was quite shocked when I started making that video. It was purely driven by my, I suppose, lifelong frustration with this, because many of my closest family and friends believe in this. And a lot of my family back in India certainly have wasted, you know, thousands, if not, you know, millions of rupees on these medications and consultations. So the Indian government part of it wasn't originally part of the plan, but that I had to include it in the end if I was to be diligent. And basically, the Indian government have set up a whole department, a whole ministry, in fact, for alternative medical therapies. I was shocked to see how much funding was provided for homeopaths. I was shocked to see how it was legitimized even on their official website. So if you can imagine going to a government website and finding a cure for something as serious as dengue fever as a homeopathic medication with absolutely no supporting evidence. I mean, that's how serious it is. And so I had to cover that. Got a lot of flack from it, both from within the family, a lot of Modi supporters in the family, and also on social media. But I think it's important to recognise that when the government supports something like this, it just further legitimizes and you know, empowers that pseudoscientific mindset that people have. It's terrible what they've done during the COVID crisis. They were spruiking all these homeopathic medications that boost your immunity, and you know, they made a fortune out of it. And the government was literally, you had ministers coming out, you know, advocating this kind of thing. So it was a terrible situation. So I thought it deserved to be exposed.
It is a terrible situation, and of course you referred to the Indian Prime Minister, who you reference quite a lot in your video. Folks, I'm going to link to Vulture Watch in this week's show notes, but if you go to YouTube and you type in Vulture Watch, you'll probably find it anyway, but please have a look at the link. Now, I getting back to the Healy one, I was quite impressed by it, and I learned quite a lot because I knew little of the product. Although I've seen similar things like this before over the years, quantum and auras and zapping, and it's nothing too new. It's a continuing disappointment to us. I'm sure you realize that the government aren't more diligent in cracking down on this utter nonsense. Are you at all worried about the Healy company coming down on you and trying to gag you in any way?
Yeah, I think I've purposefully shared the video to a number of Healy associates just to try and get a feel of what they'd say, and it's funny that there was about 3 or 4 already in the comments, and basically they haven't offered any counter argument to what I've presented, but they're basically saying, you haven't tried the Healy, so you don't know what you're talking about, or like I said before, you're part of the medical mafia. And I think that's the kind of thing I'll get, but also from a defamation perspective, I take a bit of care with my videos. I do consult, a small legal team just to try and understand what my boundaries are and what I can say and can't say. For example, Christian Halper, the investor behind Healy, who claims to be a multi-billionaire, I can't come out of my video and say he's not, because I can't provide evidence for that. So I've got to be careful around things like that. But apart from that, I think we're going to get Healy reacting to this video, because there hasn't been anything out there, at least that I'm aware of, that has been so comprehensive in terms of dismantling their whole narrative. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, we will keep an eye on that with great interest. Folks, I can't recommend these videos enough. They're really worth a look. I mean, if nothing else, you'll learn about one quack product in particular, the Healy device, and how outrageously silly to our point of view. Because, when you have a little bit of science background and you've seen these things come and go over the years, you realize just how silly these devices are. Tune up your auras with an iPhone. It basically boils down to something like that.
Exactly.
It's just incredible. It's just incredible. Well, Arjun, thank you so much for sparing some time for the Skeptic Zone. Folks, again, have a look at those videos, and we'll try to catch up with you a bit down the track. Maybe when you have another video or 2 online, we can talk about it.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Richard. It's been an honor, and I've followed your work over the years, particularly since COVID, and I think you provide a great source of rational knowledge, entertainment, all in one package. So good on you, and it's been a pleasure.
Well, you'll be definitely back again. Absolutely. But for now, Arjun Nidhigalu, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
I'm Mick West. In my podcast, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, I have extended conversations with people who have been involved in conspiracy culture. I do this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's really interesting. These people have great stories about how they fell down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, what they did down there, and what it was that helped them out. Sometimes I also talk to people who investigate conspiracy theories, and they have equally fascinating stories from the other side. Secondly, I want to understand how best to prevent the spread of conspiracy theories and misinformation, which is an increasing problem in a time when alternative media is exploding. The best way to do this is to communicate effectively with the people involved, and the best way to do that is with a nice long chat. So check it out, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, tftrh.com.
I think we need to think. Here's Susan Gerbic.
I go to bed tonight, and it's that GSOW has just written and published page 2001. And it just happened out of the blue. I was like, wait a minute, how many we got? And I was like, what? We hit 2000 yesterday. And so I think that's pretty exciting. 2001 pages we have published, and 45% are in languages other than English, which is pretty awesome, because I don't know of any other project anywhere that is trying to be so inclusive to have other languages as well, because it's just as important. Nonsense and misinformation is everywhere.
Congratulations, Susan. That's really fantastic news. And you're saying you're going to be speaking for the Gold Coast Skeptics here in Australia. What can you tell us? What can you tell us about that?
Oh, well, it's going to be in April. It's coming up pretty darn soon, as far as I'm concerned. Gold Coast Skeptics, which is a really big group, but it's very active. And I was speaking there last time I was in Australia, which was 2019, right?
In the
Back
before
the
times.
Pre-day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to be speaking to the Gold Coast Skeptics April 16th, which is a Saturday. My time, I think. I don't know. It's on the link. I don't know. I'll just show up when I'm told to show up.
You'll figure it out
all the time.
You'll figure it out.
Speaking continuously in the hopes that maybe I hit them right. But that's going to be via, over the internet.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And folks, I shall add a link to that in this week's show notes. Don't forget to check that out if you want to see Susan Gerbeck in person on your computer screen. Speaking for the Gold Coast Skeptics, check out that link. Susan, congratulations on that. Another milestone for guerrilla skepticism on Wikipedia.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? 2001. I'm so proud of my people. It just amazes me all the time. And here's the other one,
A Skeptical Odyssey.
There you go. Skeptical Odyssey. And here's the other thing you can add to that. When I just refreshed, because of course we keep track of all the page views, those Wikipedia pages we've written, because Kyle Polish from the Data Skeptic has written a program for me we called Stat Badger, and that keeps track of everything for us. So I remember the last time I think I was on the Skeptic Zone, we had hit 100 million page views.
I think that sounds familiar, yes.
I think that was the number.
Yeah.
So now, because of the power of refreshing the computer, it is 110 million
Ooh.
and 11,000. So 11,011,858.
That's almost binary.
So
that's pretty good.
If we were into numerology and all the mirroring in this, 11,011,858. You guys, I'm gonna have to.
Don't ever refresh again.
I'll never refresh again because that is pretty awesome.
Take a screenshot.
I will definitely be putting up a screenshot. Actually, it's up for the whole day. It only updates once a day, so it'll be.
When it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Take a screenshot.
Oh, okay. I'll wait. It's just a random. It only puts in once, so it'll update about an hour.
Or just take a screenshot and edit it, and we'll make believe it's real.
No, I'm good. It's an awesome number. It's really great. So
I know. I'm not discounting that.
Awesome.
And now they're starting to argue. So this is how it goes. Richard, see what I have to deal with?
What? I tell you, folks, this is what it's like when you get on the Zoom with Susan Gerbeck.
110 million page views. Thank you. Thank you. 110 million page views off of 2001. That's why, 2001. That's the song.
I knew that was familiar.
That's great, Sarah.
And Richard Saunders, thank you so much. The Skeptic Zone has been a big reason why we have editors.
I'm pleased to hear it.
All the promotion you've done over the years.
Thank you.
Be Reasonable is the interview show from the Merseyside Skeptic Society, where each month I speak to someone about their fringe beliefs. Over the years I've spoken to psychics, UFO believers, moon landing deniers, flat earthers, hollow earthers and all manner of unusual conspiracy theorists. But I've also talked to AIDS denialists, white supremacists, gay conversion therapists. I even interviewed Jim Humble, the inventor of Miracle Mineral Supplement, a form of industrial bleach that he and his followers use to treat cancer and HIV. This isn't a debate show, and my aim isn't to win an argument. But when we listen to how people promote and justify the ideas that we disagree with, even the dangerous ones, I think we become much more effective at countering those ideas. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, look for Be Reasonable on Apple Podcasts and everywhere else that podcasts live.
With the ongoing terrible situation we see every day on the news reports from Ukraine, I thought I would, with permission, I thought I would read this letter out received by my friend and colleague Brian Dunning over at the Skeptoid podcast. And this email, this message he received, is from Russia. And I thought you would find it particularly interesting. In the covering note, Brian says, an email received from a Russian subscriber to the Skeptoid podcast. I gave him 2 years complimentary premium access and am happy to do the same for any other subscribers inside Russia. Posted with permission, last name removed at his request. And I think after hearing this, you'll understand Brian's motivations. The email says, Dear Brian, hello, my name is Ivan. I have been listening and supporting Skeptoid for a long time. You are doing absolutely amazing work. Thank you. Unfortunately, I can no longer show my support financially. International payments from Russia no longer work, and even if Visa and MasterCard revert their decision, the ruble to the dollar rate makes everything in the real world unacceptably expensive. I hope a day will come when I will be able to renew my subscription. The last 2 weeks I find myself living in Orwell's 1984. The state quite literally says that war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. Doublethink is widespread. The thought police is demanding that people unlock their phones and show them the conversations and apps. The last illusion of democracy in Russia was very quickly shaken off. There are laws now that directly contradict the Constitution and human rights, and police brutality grows every day. War is the greatest test of critical thinking I can imagine. I wish I didn't know that firsthand. I feel exhausted trying to find the truth in an absolute avalanche of information. The hardest thing is that my own parents refuse to believe anything I say. They willingly put themselves into information bubbles and don't listen to anything else. They refuse to even consider alternative sources other than openly state-supported propaganda machines. Trying to talk to them is like hitting your head against a wall. Smart, educated, young Russian people don't support the war. They don't support Putin and his cruel, corrupt regime. We feel our future is stolen from us and our country hates us. And now our country made the whole world hate us. Sorry for venting, and thank you for reading. Kind regards, Ivan. What a powerful letter that is. What a powerful letter that is. And Ivan is quite right that it appears that they find themselves living in Orwell's 1984. If you haven't read the book or seen the movie, it's a milestone of literature, I think. Unbelievably, it's being repeated in the real world once again. So thank you to Brian Dunning for allowing me to share that with you. And good on you, Brian, for your policy there, because I guess those people in Russia are certainly in dire need of good information. And of course, without going into details or names, I do know Russian people here in Australia, and I can assure you that they are saddened and horrified at the events unfolding. Now, before long, I hope to catch up with Brian, if not in person, then certainly online for an interview. So in the following weeks, sometime down the track, keep an eye out for that.
G'day, this is Dr. Karl Kruszinski, proud to be a skeptic, and you can find out more about me at drkarl.com and get lots of free stuff there as well.
Now it's time once again to head back to those archives at the treasure trove of digital goodness at trove.nla.gov.au, your online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia, chock-a-block, full to the brim with digital archives. And in keeping with our theme from last week, we're going to be looking at more articles which mention paranormal, psychics, and UFOs. And our first entry comes from May, the 10th of May, 1993, from the Canberra Times, and it's a review of a TV program I remember. I do remember this program all those years ago. And this is by Ian Warden. Extraordinary Claims of Ordinariness.
These questions the human mind cannot answer. Out of reach, past all we can see, hear, and touch, beyond all we understand, lies the extraordinary. The extraordinary is the day Sandra Hill found she had lived before. A past life experience. A nightmare revisited under hypnosis as Sandra relives her own death.
My foot caught in the hoop. With that, I rolled and fell and landed up in a heap on the bottom of the stairs.
Tonight on The Extraordinary.
Good evening. I'm Warwick Moss.
What was so refreshing about Sandra Hill's past life regression, just one of the several mundane items in The Extraordinary, Prime, which is a TV network, Prime, Thursday, 8:30 p.m, was that she did not seem to have been anyone special in her past life. Most people who claim to have had past lives claim to have been someone famous. Chopin, perhaps, Boudica, or Vlad the Impaler, and to have done great things. But Sandra only claimed to have been a slip of a gal who lived near Campbelltown in the 1860s, and indeed only claimed to be able to remember being a clumsy girl tripping over her dress and falling down some stairs to her death in her haste to greet her lover who was standing at the foot of the stairs. Her modesty was beguiling, and certainly seemed to beguile the program's anchor credulist, Warwick Moss, who purred her story to us with the help of Sandra herself. One searched Sandra's eyes to see if they betrayed her as a fibber, but of course it was a characteristic of credulists who claim to have had extraordinary experiences that what may begin in their hearts as a fib eventually takes on, after it has been lied about often enough, a semblance of truth. This is why 100 million people are able to claim with complete sincerity that they were at Woodstock, when in fact they were at Queanbeyan or Paris, Texas instead. Skeptics have, plainly, lost the good fight we have fought with all our might against the New Age forces of credulism. Thursday's hour of The Extraordinary, with its tripe about past lives, UFOs, miracle workers, posthumous priests, and eerie clever dolphins, was succeeded on Prime by another hour of the same New Age dross in Miracles and Other Wonders, 9:30 p.m. One gives crime credit for knowing what viewers want, but the thought that they, perhaps most of them school teachers, university vice-chancellors and members of the Australian Capital Territory House of Assembly, want 2 hours of immersion in superstition is somehow depressing in the extreme. Both programs began on Thursday with intellectually outrageous assertions.
Flashbacks. Deja vu. Feelings that we've been here before. Sensations we've all felt at some time or another.
Purred Warwick. We haven't all felt them. This columnist, for example, has never felt any of them. It is true that visiting sprawling, featureless Soweto outside Johannesburg, I had the temporary sensation of having been there before, but then I realized that I was only recalling instead a visit to Tuggeranong.
Sometimes, drawled Darren McGavin, anchor charlatan of Miracles and Other Wonders, there are wondrous events which occur to average people that defy rational explanation.
But of course, even when those average people who claim to have experienced some wondrous event are not lying, there are only every events which defy rational explanation if one is utterly resistant to, because they are so boring, rational explanations.
The following dramas are inspired by real stories.
Miracles and Other Wonders assured us in an attempt to impress. But of course, this is a sentiment that is also true of so many Mickey Mouse cartoons. Nothing in Miracles and Other Wonders seemed particularly miraculous or wonderful. The story of a woman who had been asleep alone in her bed when a kind of guardian ghost appeared unto her, scaring her almost guaneless, and advising her to
"Look outside your window, girl,"
which she did, seeing and scaring a prowler who was later caught by the police, only inspired the thought that a more thoughtful ghost would have left the girl asleep and would have appeared to the prowler instead, haunting him off the premises. As it was, the inconsiderate spectre subjected the girl to 2 nasty frights. The wizened Catholic priest, and where would programs about the paranormal be without the contribution of papists, who claimed to have been talking for 37 years to a saintly priest who had been dead for 200 years, could have been prosecuting these rather one-sided conversations for all sorts of reasons other than the profited one, that the late priest was there to be spoken to. The old, living priest could, for example, have been Dotty. The rational explanation that leapt to mind during the extraordinary for the claim of the chunky actor Lou Ferrigno, who played the Incredible Hulk, that he had seen his Uncle Pete glowing just before he, Uncle Pete, dropped dead at a hitherto happy wedding, was that Lou was mistaken. He seemed incredibly thick. And then the light can play extraordinary tricks. I remember one day sitting in the House of Representatives and seeing a shaft of sunlight pick out, for special illumination, the Prime Minister, Mr. Hawke. Had I been a credulist and an admirer of that horrible little man, it would have been easy to imagine that he had somehow been singled out for transfiguration. No doubt the thought occurred to Mr. Hawke, the most vain of men, and perhaps we will hear his account of this extraordinary event in the next series of The Extraordinary. Thursdays was the last of the current series, but as it ended, a disembodied voice told us with a rapture I could not share,
"Your response to this first series has been so great that we're definitely planning a new series for later this year."
In the whole 2 hours of Miracles, the most miraculous event I saw depicted was during an advertising break in which a product made by the Ajax company was used to clean up a nasty stain on a stove.
Tonight on The Extraordinary.
Ah, yes, The Extraordinary. And now we'll flip over to the United States and we look at the Brownsville Herald dated Sunday, June 29, 1997. UFO witness recalls the day Earth was visited. Now this does sound dramatic. By Martha Mendoza, Associated Press writer, Roswell, New Mexico. In an old West ranching town, sitting in a conservative brick home,
An 80-year-old man is talking about the time he saw the aliens. Frank Kaufman doesn't seem crazy. He seems nice, if a bit grumpy, about the recent influx of UFO buffs.
You've got these guys coming out of the woodwork,
Kaufman says.
There's people who said they've been abducted. There's women claiming they've given birth to alien babies. That's just a bunch of crap, see?
But Kaufman, too, has a story to tell. This is a town where regular people, respectable folk, merchants, military veterans, and city officials speak candidly about the day they heard about or were involved somehow in helping recover a crashed UFO and the bodies of aliens killed in the crash. Their stories are part of a growing legend, commonly referred to as, quote, the Roswell Incident, end quote, which locals will cash in this week with an anniversary bash expected to boost the local economy. Kaufman, a retired government intelligence agent, first went public with his story 3 years ago. Since then, he's repeated it about 10 times.
I'm somewhat leery about giving interviews because I don't want to be classed in with these jokers, these wannabes, these would-bes,
he says. 50 years ago, Kaufman says he and several other civilian and military personnel working at the Roswell Army Airfield were dispatched to check on reports of a fireball that had crashed northwest of town. They soon found the site. The glow was visible, he says, from the highway.
We were 200 to 300 yards from the impact area, and it didn't look like a plane. It wasn't anything like a missile. It was kind of a strange-looking craft, kind of a horseshoe, almost a stealth bomber-type shape,
he says. After crews in safety suits made sure the area was not toxically contaminated, Kaufman says he approached the downed craft for a closer look.
When we saw what it was, this strange craft, and the bodies, we were just shocked,
he says.
We radioed in to have body bags sent out, and they were carted off to some base hospital. The craft itself was loaded onto a flatbed with a tarp on it, and driven right down Main Street to the base.
He describes 5 dead aliens.
One was thrown out. He was up against the arroyo. One was half in, half out, and the other 3 were inside.
He says they didn't have big eyes or long, stringy fingers. He says they were
trim, good-looking people. They were hairless and had kind of a ash-colored skin. They were maybe 5'3" or 5'4".
He says. The most amazing thing, says Kaufman, is that the craft had no fuel, just
a series of octagonal-shaped cells.
Kaufman says he and his colleagues,
for security reasons, took on a monkey oath
the evening after visiting the site.
We saw nothing, we heard nothing, and we will say nothing,
he says. And for 47 years, Kaufman says he stuck to the vow. Then, 3 years ago, as several books were published and a variety of alleged witnesses began speaking up, Kaufman told his story to an author. He insisted, at first, that his name not be revealed. But these days, after repeating his tale a number of times, Kaufman is a bit more candid.
I'm not going to be around much longer,
he says.
Folks might as well know.
The first UFO stories came out of Roswell in early July 1947, after the military issued a press release that a flying disc had been recovered. Higher military authorities refuted the information the following day, saying it was a weather balloon, but the release had already been reprinted on news wires and in newspapers around the world. And Mac Brazel, a Corona area rancher, told reporters he found a crumpled mess of strange metal while riding the range to check his livestock after a particularly stormy night. It wouldn't tear. It wouldn't ignite. Brazel took it to the sheriff.
Chaves County Sheriff, or could be Chaves, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, George Wilcox thought the debris might be a crashed plane from the Roswell Army Airfield, so he contacted Major Jesse Marcel, the post's intelligence officer. Led by Brazel, a group of military officers went to the site. According to some accounts, several large pieces of the unusual metal were recovered on the Brazel ranch, along with the corpse of 4 or 5 aliens. Theories abound how wreckage and aliens could have been seen and recovered in different places. One contends 2 flying saucers collided, showering debris on one ranch and leaving 2 demolished aircraft and several alien bodies at another 2 sites. The General Accounting Office, the investigative arm of Congress, in a 1995 report said that records from the Roswell base of the late 1940s had been destroyed. The GAO was unable to determine what happened and said the, quote, debate on what crashed at Roswell continues, end quote. Lieutenant Walter Haut was at Roswell Army Airfield in 1947. He was the public information officer who issued the press release. But Haut, now 74, wasn't told exactly where the flying disc reported in his news release was found, nor did he himself ever see a UFO. But he remains a believer.
There must have been something in the skies at the time,
he says.
There's just too much evidence.
Glenn Dennis, 72, a retired mortician, who says he got a call from the military base during the first week of July 1947 asking for several small, hermetically sealed coffins.
He also wanted to know about procedures for picking up bodies that had been left in the elements for several days, possibly mutilated by predators.
Dennis says,
I asked if I could help. He declined.
Kaufman, meanwhile, contends classified information remains that he will take to his grave.
It's extremely important to our national security that some of the information surrounding this case remains secret,
he says.
There are things that the public is never going to be able to learn.
Oh, Roswell, New Mexico, the gift that keeps on giving, although really, you don't hear too much about it anymore. And so there we go, another wrap-up of looking through the archives for paranormal, psychics, UFOs, and such. It's rich pickings, there's much more to come, and it's a really interesting thing to do, to look through archives and see what people over the decades thought of the paranormal. And you too can harvest the rich pickings at Trove or any online database of newspapers and so on. But here in Australia, just go to trove.nla.gov.au. Well, of course, you can do that from all around the world. And you'll never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and as ever, thank you to my Patreons and my supporters and my benefactors out there via PayPal, who support the show every week with micropayments or once a month via PayPal. It all goes to making the show possible for everybody else to listen to, so we are all very grateful for you wonderful people. Now here's a note from my friends in Canberra Skeptics. They want me to remind you that the Pint of Science program, it's a festival, Pint of Science Festival, 9th to 11th of May. And they're looking for speakers. And I'll link to this in the show notes. Expressions of interest to present at Pint of Science 2022. And this is sort of like science for the masses, science in the pub. Grab a pint of beer, or maybe ginger beer, and listen to some great science. And who knows, hopefully by May, I may be able to get out in person and interview some scientists with this program.
Now, I don't know if you can hear it, but the birds outside the Skeptic Zone studio are going bonkers. What's going on out there? Let me open a window. What's going on out there? There they go. Well, that's not too bad, I suppose. Normally I stop for the birds, but I'll let them chirp at the moment because they're not stopping. While the birds are chirping, the skies are clear. I don't know what's going on out there. This is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter @SkepticZone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.